Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate. They write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team. The question institutions need to ask isn't just like, what is AI going to do for us? But it's like, well, how do we ensure that AI aligns with our mission? And so
AI and mission alignment, that might be a separate pod, but holy cow, you're so right.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing over 15 years of ed tech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Seth, it's a new year, our first recordings in 2025. How was your holiday?
It was awesome. If you get to experience the holidays with a little one, it is just the best. And so Lola's just about 4. And so obviously the magic of the holiday season is in full effect. So I'm feeling very full coming off of like a really memorable holiday. So how was yours?
That's great. Well, I'm actually up in Northern California right now. We got up here about a week ago, and I'm just coming off of this amazing Napa weekend, hit a bunch of wineries, did a little shopping. So the holidays were great, but Napa.
It's an awesome area of the country. I'm so glad you get time to spend there.
Yeah. My husband's family is up here in NorCal. So it's nice we're getting to spend a couple weeks up here, and I'm doing a little work from Marin and seeing friends and family. So yeah, no complaints whatsoever. But Seth, we're just going to get right into this programming. Folks know we have been off for the last week. We did not drop an episode on the 30th, but we've been filling up your Pulse feed with all of those amazing Hall of Fame episodes.
Yes, they've been awesome. That's been so fun.
It has been. And that was the inaugural Hall of Fame for Enrollify, our very first 10 people ever inducted. The episodes got a ton of buzz. So if you haven't checked those out yet, folks, just head over to the Pulse feed and you'll find them all there. And we're looking forward to doing this every single year. So it is a fresh year and anything is possible.
Love it. Well, I'm excited to get back in. I'm like ready to dust it off, get ready. I'm good to chat. So I'm excited to tackle today's topic.
Okay. Well, today's topic, we let you all know what we were planning to discuss a couple weeks back. We talk about artificial intelligence a lot, but one of the areas that we haven't touched on in a while, actually since maybe our April Fool's Day episode last year, is the ethical side of AI. And, AI is it's not a convenience. It is a really transformational technology that is redefining student experience. And it's exciting, but it could be, and I'm sure for some listeners, it's a little unsettling too. There's a lot of public scrutiny that, especially the last couple of weeks, I've noticed like concerns about how data is used and like the potential for bias in the algorithm and sometimes even unintended consequences of AI-powered automation. So, you have that on one side, but then at the same time, there are policies and standards that are beginning to take shape. And I really believe that 2025 is the year of the AI task force. If it isn't already on your campus, I have a feeling it'll be there in the next 6 months.
I totally agree. I think it's going to need to be, and there's a lot to unpack here. Like, there's just a lot to talk about. It's a topic that's really interesting, and it's unfortunately a very nascent topic for most institutions. I think it's been a very practical one in a lot of ways, like tool based. But I think it's important to step back and talk about ethics and AI. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, well, and so do CTOs out there. I saw an Educause statistic that 65% of CTOs see artificial intelligence as a strategic priority, but less than half have policies around the ethical use of it. So I think this, I think this can be a big topic this year.
I'm actually surprised it's only 65%. I'd love to meet a CTO that doesn't think this is going to be a massive component of what they do in the future, but maybe I'm missing something.
All right. So I think that we can break this down into a couple areas. So let's first talk about the ethical challenges that exist. And then we can talk about some of the frameworks that we can build around ethical AI. And then we should probably end on some actionable next steps for listeners. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect. I'm game.
Cool. All right. So I think from the challenge perspective, I'll highlight 3 things, and I'd love to hear you sound off on these too, Seth. But the 3 things I think that are top of mind for me: data privacy, the bias in the algorithms, and over-reliance on automation. So I've already kind of teased those up a bit, but let's take each one. In terms of data privacy, we know schools are managing such a volume of data every single day: grades, attendance, financial aid applications, behavioral analytics, predictive analytics, right? And we know that AI thrives on this data, but what's the cost behind it, right? So when student data is collected and stored and used in ways that a student might not fully understand, what's going on there? And so transparency has to be key, but I don't know that students really know or realize how their data is feeding predictive analytics or informing decisions about their academic journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really interesting component because obviously there's already a large amount of student data that exists within LMS or within an SIS, and so the student data already exists. But I feel like it propels the conversation, and depending on your lens, the problem, if you look at it from an AI perspective. I mean, one of the biggest components for AI is what obviously is the AI being trained on, and what is the data that's being used to feed into that. And when we think about all the awesome applications for AI, we've talked about all the things that are being done and can be done to improve both the student learning experience, but also actually achieving improved student learning outcomes. That's all based on tools that are utilizing data to make themselves stronger, smarter, and faster. And one of the first things I think is do people understand the data that's being used, and do they have a right to understand? The first answer is yes, they have a right to understand to an extent, obviously. But let's be candid here. None of us read the terms and conditions on anything online anymore, right? You click the box and you sign up for a thing. No one's going through and reading 120 pages. And so my first big piece is I think we need to figure out how to simplify from a narrative perspective and have conversations around at a high level what's going on with your data and how's it being used. Because I do think that conceptually we want these tools to be built for us, not just to help the tool overall be better, but AI applications are going to be particularly powerful as they get more and more personalized. The area that I'm most excited about, in my past, I have worked in environments that have focused on precision education and personalized learning, where the way you actually teach and instruct can be altered based on the student's own behaviors. So you can actually deliver content in ways that a student is more likely to achieve a learning objective. And so it really takes the experience for actual teaching and learning and makes it quite personalized. But that also means then that these platforms have to retain a significant amount of data about how you learn and how you engage to be able to customize themselves for you. I think that's great, but I think people need to know that. And so I do think the first is an elevation of a simplified narrative around, hey, here's what we're doing. And so to me, the challenge for all of us is as an organization, can you have that elevator pitch or that cocktail conversation where we can say at a high level, here's what's going on? Without that, I do worry that it's a little disingenuous if collectively we're all just saying, well, here's 120 pages, single space, feel free to read it if you want. But the reality is you have to click the box or you don't get to enroll or experience, the learning at our institution. So that's my biggest first concern, is that none of us know, and no one seems to be really simplifying exactly what's being used. So that's the first one I throw out as a concern.
Yeah, well, you also touched on the bias side of things too a couple minutes ago. And, we need to interrogate the tools and the companies that are providing the tools. And this connects to what you're just saying. So it's like, who's designing the algorithm and what assumptions are being baked into this data? The tools are only going to be as good as the data that they learn from. And if the data reflects societal inequities, the tools are just going to continue to perpetuate them. So, my example would be if, say, you're using predictive analytics to identify at-risk students more proactively, well, that might be relying on this foundation of historical data that is disproportionately flagging students from certain communities versus like leveling out the playing field. The tools wind up just reinforcing like these disparities that already exist.
Yeah, that's such a great call. And it's a challenge like pre-AI and beyond AI. It's one of the conversations in my career that I've had on several occasions that's always been unfortunate is when you're at an institution that wants to improve retention, one of the conversations that always seems to come up is like, well, who are the students that are potentially most successful in our program? And typically they're students who've been most exposed to the highest level of education previously, meaning the students who are best prepared are often the students that perform the best. Not always, but that's often the case. And so it turns to like, well, how do we get students that are more prepared? It's like, well, for many institutions, aren't we trying to increase access? And in the process of increasing access, that means that at times you may bring in students who may need a different level of support in order to maintain the level of retention that you're looking for. And so I think that's a huge concern. And to me, I think there's a high level of like, you brought up, Chris, like how are we going to understand the potential for bias, but then investigate and actually address and solve it? We're seeing this at like a macro level with, OpenAI and with Grok or with Google. There's always examples online of people finding biases in the tools themselves, and they get addressed when those get surfaced. But the challenge is with AI, unlike kind of a more fixed software solution, is that these things are evolving every day. So it's not just like, how are we going to investigate, but almost like, what's the cadence of inquiry? And so to me, the biggest concern with bias in AI is having it be unidentified, because it feels, generally speaking, that when bias is identified, it can be addressed and solved for. But like, what's going on that you're not catching? And so then whose responsibility is it to catch that? Are you outsourcing that responsibility to your partner? Are you doing that with the tools that you're vetting? And like, what's the cadence at which you're doing it? And what's your strategy for that? And I think that like overall, there's like, well, we don't want bias in AI. And so that's great. We're all aligned on that we don't want it. But like, what are we actually going to do? And most importantly, how? And I don't feel like the conversations around that are nearly as thorough as they could be.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I'm equipped to like be leading that conversation either. Like there are people far smarter than me out there who are probably well more positioned to be leading that piece of the conversation. But I think, right, identifying it is certainly the first step. But yes, we got to get deeper than just saying, hey, this is a problem and starting to figure out what the solutions are. Staying on concerns for just one more moment, though, over-reliance on automation is that third one I mentioned. And I think this is where, like, we continue to talk about the humanity that has to exist behind AI. And I think about a scenario where maybe, like, from, the financial aid perspective, AI might identify logical funding options for a new student, but logic isn't necessarily going to account for that individual's unique circumstances. Maybe they're a single parent and they're balancing childcare and they're taking class at night because that's the only time they can do it. And so what AI is pairing to them might logically make sense, but just be totally void of like the reality that individual is experiencing. So that's right, like the clear need for humans in the loop, because the advisor or the administrator who is finalizing that financial aid package is going to be able to put more context and empathy and nuance into it that, an AI algorithm just can't replicate.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another concern that I would bring up, and probably my last big one would be, I have a lot of concerns about access to AI. And there's kind of two examples. At the most tangible level for us in the post-secondary space, I'm seeing so many colleges and universities that are trying to reduce the utilization of AI, trying to catch AI being used by students, and they're trying to exclude it as a tool that can be used to perform course-related work. The challenge is, first and foremost, to me, is that like that's the exact opposite of what they're going to run into in the workforce, which is that as soon as you move into the workforce, which professional pathways is a huge component of the job that we do and the job to be done for college universities. So like we are like intentionally restricting access. The second concern I have is beyond just whether or not we are endorsing it and allowing it to be accessed by students from like a practical and like student handbook perspective, is also that so many AI tools come with a cost barrier. And so, a huge concern that I have is that are we just going to see a situation of like haves and have-nots where like students who have disproportionate access because they have funding or resources are going to be able to have a higher level experience, leave with a different level of a skill set and a different acumen than students that don't. And so like a very tangible thing I would say is like, most college and universities provide some semblance of like a Microsoft Office license for students. Many institutions that are like art-based institutions will offer like Adobe Creative Cloud for students as a tool. I would love to see a real flip where instead of trying to ban AI as an example or open AI, I would love to see, institutions that say we're going to get every single student that enrolls like a ChatGPT Pro account, whether that's that tool or another tool. But like, I would love to see an increase in accessibility and the thought process we bring to access be applied to AI. Those conversations very well may be having. They're not happening in my circles. I've not run into those, but I'd love to see AI talked about much more the same way we talk about providing, Adobe Creative Cloud to students. And without that, I just worry that access is going to become a huge issue. And I have not found it as cornerstone a component of the ethics and AI conversations that I have engaged with to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't either. And instead, I just continue to see articles about, implementing software to catch the students who are using it.
Yeah, let's use AI to catch AI. And there are so many examples of that I've seen online of students, especially on Reddit, that are posting that like they're getting caught for using AI and they haven't used it. And I've actually literally saw a post on Reddit a couple weeks ago where a student was saying like, I now screen record myself writing so that way people can, it's like, this is so ridiculous. Not only because like that's such a burden to put on the student, they have to now document themselves creating the work just for you to believe them. But also the second they graduate and go into the workforce, employers are going to want them to have these skills. So we're literally, it's like we are perpetuating a larger skill gap rather than closing it. And that to me is such a key component of what college universities do. It just feels like it is such a miss from an execution perspective.
Yeah, I get fired up about this too as somebody who would love to employ a recent college grad who has an AI skill set as they walk into the door. And yet, like, our institutions are, actively pushing for the opposite direction, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's in some ways it's like a tangent conversation outside of the narrowed ethics in AI, but in another way it's really broader about like the broader ethics of operating as a college university and what are you charging for and how are you preparing students. And so like to me it totally has a place in this conversation and really thinking about what can be done, because regrettably, I think if you leave, this is probably my last broader point, if you leave the conversation of ethics and AI to exclusively the academy, I think we're going to get the wrong direction in many cases. And so I think it's really important for institutions when we think about the who behind ethics and AI, like, okay, literally who within an institution is going to help us frame up our perspective on some of these things that we've talked about. I think faculty have a very critical voice in that conversation, but I think it would be a paramount mistake to have that be the only voice. And I think in the absence of like more formal AI committees, like you talked at the beginning of this pod, like seeing more of those this year, in the absence of those, I think institutions are unintentionally having the academy be the exclusive voice of what the approach to ethics and AI should be. And I candidly, I think that's a mistake.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of naturally moved into talking about these frameworks for building a more ethical approach to AI on a campus. And I think to, tie it to what we were just saying, like the question institutions need to ask isn't just like, what is AI going to do for us? But it's like, well, how do we ensure that AI aligns with our mission? And so that's like
AI and mission alignment. That might be a separate pod, but holy cow, you're so right. I've never thought about it in that framework. Man, that is so critical. And that is not how anybody's thinking about it. They're thinking about like tool application and some ethics in AI. But yeah, AI as from a mission alignment perspective. Okay, that's like my biggest light bulb from this. I'm taking that one. That's huge.
Write it down.
Totally.
We'll do an episode just on that. But when we think about like, all right, let's like start to tease it out, Seth. Like, how do you do that? Well, you need to, I hate advocating for committees and task forces.
I know the fact that you and I are advocating for over a committee in higher ed really shows that we have come full circle, Mallory.
Kills me.
We have
There's a
come
little part of
full
me
circle.
dying. Yeah, a little part of me just died. But I think, look, you need to have a cross-functional committee, or at least a point at which you can have this collaboration to make sure that policies that are being created are going to address fairness, the transparency we talked about, and accountability before the problem arises. It's like crisis communications 101. You need to have the plan before the problem happens. So it's going to force our institutional leaders to think a little further ahead, and similar to crisis comms 101, the obligation is to protect the community, to protect the person that's being impacted by it. So the student is going to have to be at the center of any of these policies. And that gets back to our points from earlier around transparency and trust. And then I go one step further to say it is our college and universities is a requirement for our college and universities to enable AI literacy. And that's not just for the students, but it's also for the staff and the faculty. And so that is going to require investing in professional development for those people to grasp AI applications, limitations, the ethical stakes, and to help these educators become responsible stewards of artificial intelligence, not just, users of the technology.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree more.
Well, Seth, anything actionable that listeners should be taking away in your opinion?
I have the most tangible one, which is that if you work for a college university, even if you don't work for a private organization, you need to have a seat at the table personally. And I mean, make the move, not just your boss or your division, but how can you become that AI advocate within your own organization? I mentioned it way back when we did the keynote for the last Engage Summit. I talked about becoming the AI linchpin and really the champion for it internally. You have to step up this year and do this and put in the time. It's not only, I think, a huge career opportunity for you personally, but I actually think it's a critical moment in time for your organization, and you have an opportunity to influence it. So if you don't have it, secure your seat should be on your to-do list for 2025.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And one step farther, be the person that's putting those policies together. Lead by example. When you see something, say something. If you can help foster that culture of ethical inquiry and transparency on your campus, you will achieve that goal of becoming the linchpin. And I do think that can have some really big impact to people's careers this year. So
yeah, totally agree.
Cosign. Yeah. All right. Well, listeners, we're already at the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. First one of the new year. We're so excited to be back with you and in your earbuds. If you haven't done this yet, we would so appreciate two things. First of all, subscribe to our show. Apple, Spotify, wherever you love to listen to podcasts. That subscription means so much to us. But even more than that, if you want to give us a late holiday gift, write a review. Let us know what you have enjoyed the most over the last year of listening to me and Seth. What were your favorite episodes? What are the things you would like us to focus on? We're like your Uber driver. 5 stars and a nice review goes a really long way.
It does. It really does. We read them all. We appreciate them all. It's a great call. We'd welcome it if you can carve out 30 seconds for us.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week, friends. Have a wonderful start to your January. Bye-bye. The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.